Hi everyone, and welcome to a video presentation on how to develop a quant strategy. So there will be a series of videos based on this research paper, including this presentation. The paper being Best Practices in Research for Quantitative Equity Strategies by Cerniglia, Fabozzi, and Kolm. It's an excellent paper, and I highly recommend you giving it a read. So the topics for this presentation is as follows. I'll start by giving some brief comments on what is a quantitative strategy and also the philosophy that drives these type of strategies, which is the scientific philosophy. I'll then talk about how our quant strategies developed as they were discussed in the paper that I mentioned. And this section will be divided up as follows: formulating investment ideas and strategies, developing signals, acquiring and processing data, analyzing the signals, building the strategy, and finally, evaluating, testing, and implementing the strategy. I'll then end this presentation with my conclusion and my references. So let's start with what is a quantitative strategy. So as stated in the paper, a quantitative strategy is a systematic data and model-based approach to making investment decisions. And its most important characteristic is the scientific approach. So let's give some brief comments on the scientific approach and its philosophy. And specifically, we'll look at the scientific method as applied to quantitative equity strategy modeling, since that is what is discussed in the paper, but it certainly generalizes to more broader schemes as well. So let me give some characteristics. First, you want the development of a thoughtful hypothesis or thesis that is going to be evaluated. The use of empirical work to attempt to put precision around investment decisions and economic reasoning. Reliance on high standards of analytical rigor. Use of sensitivity analysis to challenge assumptions and context in which the strategy was developed. Incorporation of adjustments to the strategy based on judgment, and ability to explicitly measure results. And finally, incorporation of revisions or updates to the model as new information becomes available. So giving some key ideas on the philosophy behind these models, how they are being approached, let's quickly talk about how our quant strategies developed. So in the paper, they outline 5 steps to developing a quant strategy. And that is formulating the investment ideas and strategies, developing signals, acquiring and processing data, analyzing the signals, building the strategy, and finally, evaluating, testing, and implementing the strategy. So let me give some brief comments on each of the points in this process. So we start with formulating the ideas and strategies for investment. So a successful quantitative strategy often starts with some economic intuition. And some key points to keep in mind here is that background research can be helpful, in particular, looking at what others have tried or implemented. So this is primarily, one can look at the academic literature or the industry literature that is being published by others. Trading idea versus quantitative strategy. So a trading idea is a shorter term horizon. So for example, a specific event or mispricing, and a quantitative strategy tends to be a longer term horizon. So exploits, for example, opportunities to process information better, receive premiums associated with anomalies, or identify mispricing. So next, developing signals. So signals provide the basic building blocks for the model used to create an investment strategy. And some key points, they're built from data, they're quantitative measures that represent an investment idea. It varies depending on the investment thesis and the data representing the thesis. And as 2 examples, one can look at a stock's underlying characteristics, such as its return on equity and valuation ratio, or a sentiment signal from unstructured data, such as text data, for example. Moving on, acquiring and processing data. So a big theme in this paper is data, and data is critical to a strategy's success. So some very quick key points. It needs to be carefully stored in an infrastructure that is scalable and flexible. And using new data sources, a researcher or researchers should expand the information set. Now, analyzing the signals. So you perform a variety of statistical tests and econometric techniques on the data to evaluate the empirical properties of signals. So some key points. It's used to understand the risk and return potential of a signal. An example being statistically testing whether a signal Sharpe ratio is larger than 1. And they may form the basis for building a more complete trading strategy. Now, building the strategy, a model represents a mathematical or systematic specification of the trading strategy. And some key points to keep in mind, two important considerations: the selection of the specific signals and how these signals are combined. And this may also be motivated by economic intuition, which drives the trading strategy. And then finally, the last point on the diagram that I had was evaluating, testing, and implementing. So the final steps involve assessing the estimation, specification, and forecast quality of the model. Key points. Analysis includes goodness of fit, which is done often in sample, the forecasting ability, which is done out of sample, and sensitivity and risk characteristics of the model. Key drivers, empirical validation and testing, and finally, research judgment and experience is crucial here. So in this presentation, we gave a very quick outline to constructing a quant strategy based on the research paper that I mentioned in the beginning. And we started with what is a quant strategy and the philosophy that it's based on, being the scientific philosophy. And finally, we discussed 5 steps to developing a quant strategy as discussed in the paper. So my reference is, of course, this paper, which I've mentioned several times. So if you're interested in reading more, I highly recommend you following up on the link, which should also be in the description of this video. And with that, I thank you for your time. And if you enjoyed this content and would like to see more content on quant-related things, I highly recommend you check out our YouTube channel and subscribe. Thank you.